All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, all fans of all aces, I am Beast Mike. You've now arrived in my train of thought. It's time for Miami Mock Mondays to return to Mondays. But before we get there, I got to get to the free agency moves that Miami made, and some of them. I'm not going to go through all of them. There's a lot that Miami has done, and most of them are one-year deals. Obviously, Malik Willis I talked about in a different video. So it's not going to be him, and it's not going to be all the other moves. But I'm going to talk about the moves that I think are the most interesting, and I think of the guys signed may have a real shot of actually starting on this team. So let's get into it right away. The receiver moves. Miami didn't have too many receivers already on the roster in terms of actual bodies. And it was Jalen Waddle, Malik Washington, Theo Weiss, and Taj Washington were effectively the main guys here. Now, the first three have made some sort of impact during games, especially Waddle and Malik Washington. But now, Tutu Atwell and Jalen Tolbert. Now, these guys, I think, are very interesting. They sure fit the mold of the smaller receivers that Miami has had over the last few years, but they can run. They have good speed, and they are pretty versatile in the sense of you can line them up wherever you have to, especially Atwell. Atwell, I think, has a real shot of being a prime starter on this team unless Miami drafts a receiver. Did I have one in this draft? We'll see. But anyway, I do think that this would be a decent move. I like both those moves for those receivers. On teams where they came from Dallas and LA respectively, they weren't really getting as many targets as they possibly could have. Tolbert and Atwell, I think, could be pretty useful with Washington and Waddle in various packages. So, and especially with the motion that Miami will probably still use with Bobby Slowick. The other moves I think are the most interesting, and this one's honestly my favorite. David Ojabo coming over from the Ravens. And I think part of this was because I can't believe he didn't take off in Baltimore. Sure, he may have been the first couple of years still trying to heal from the torn Achilles, where he would have been a locked first-round pick had it not been for his combine workout where he destroyed the Achilles during said workout, pro day at Michigan. And I'm amazed he didn't really turn up. And for that matter, honestly, a lot of the Ravens edge rushers recently have not turned up as well as they could have. And we saw what happened with Odafe Oweh. Once he left Baltimore, he became an absolute monster that he was built to be. Let's go PSU. He got 11 sacks or so, and he really got a major deal with the Chargers and was absolutely crushing it once he got out of there. So I think that maybe that could be a scheme thing. And ideally, Ojabo fits well with Jeff Hafley's scheme as a pass rusher that Miami desperately needs. And as for Josh Uche, another Michigan man, I think Uche, will do better and be a little closer to the Patriot days where he was actually pretty good and had a monster 11.5 sack year early on in his career than the Eagles years where it just didn't work out. And the Eagles, notorious over the last few years, haven't really developed pass rushers from within to what they need to be. They've had to go out and get pass rushers or get Brandon Graham and break glass in case of emergency to get Brandon Graham back. And it explains the Jaden Phillips trade, and obviously Phillips just made himself a bunch of money in Carolina to be the main pass rusher there. But the two Michigan men, I think, could be decent. I like both of them in terms of spot pass rushing duties, especially in 4-3 sets, and Ojabo maybe in a 3-4 even. I think that'll work out pretty well for this Dolphins team in terms of depth. And Miami sorely needed at that pass rushing spot. I'm still drafting a pass rusher. You may know who I'm going to put in this mock draft, but we'll see if I can get there. And then the other two major signings, I would say, for this Dolphins team. First, Zane Gonzalez, who I was a little surprised that Miami signed a kicker after Riley Patterson was actually really good last year. And it was not a distance thing. It was just a generally good kicker. I was a little surprised that Miami got Patterson. Now, Miami did get Patterson back, but I was a little surprised that they got Zane Gonzalez there. Now, Gonzalez has been known to have a very strong leg and been able to kick really well from distance. He's had his issues, obviously, with some field goals early on in his career, but he's generally been a pretty respectable kicker. So I guess I can live with the competition that will come. And then Jamari Slayer from the Chargers, whom I think all trolled LAC for their terrible offensive line. And yes, Slayer was a starter on that line, sure. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? He's probably more tackle than guard. And Miami, I think, still needs a starting guard. But he obviously chose to go to Miami because there's a real shot to start at guard alongside Jonas Alvanea and be the opposite, and or he starts instead of Salvanea at left guard, which ideally that's the play, and I would move Jonah to right. Like I said all along, no matter what happens in free agency or the draft, I got to move Jonah to right where I think he's a little bit more comfortable and make room for whoever the other starting guard would be, and I would feel so much better about this. Obviously, knowing that Austin Jackson is coming back on a rework deal, your right tackle, I would still probably draft one if I could. We'll see if I'm able to do so in this mock draft, or Miami could develop from within with other signings. That may come either now or in June when the cap room gets a little bit better after the Bradley Chubb and Tua money evens out, which effectively will give us about $9 and change million in terms of salary cap space. But now let's get to business that we are all here for. Miami Mock Mondays. How did it work out for me this week? Let's see what Volume 8 has in store. So, the first pick here, the 11th pick in the draft, turned out to be very intriguing. I didn't think this would happen, and I honestly would think that there's no shot of happening, but it's one of those run to the board type of cats that I've been saying all along that I would absolutely go get. Sonny Styles fell to me. I can't believe it either. He fell to me in a mock draft for once, and now I decided, you know what? Best player on the board. We could use a third outside linebacker because I'm not trying to start Chop Robinson in a 4-3 set where he is a starting linebacker. He's an edge rusher. I'm not doing this. I'm having a linebacker that can actually move around. It is way better in coverage than Chop generally is. Chop is way better downhill in terms of rushing the passer. Not that Styles can't. Anyway, Styles, pretty much Swiss Army knife. You can line him up wherever in the back seven, and he could go to work. If you want him covering tight ends, I think he can do that. You want him rushing the passer, I think he can do that. You think he can sneakily play safety a little bit? Hey, I think he's got that in him. I think he could absolutely pull it off at times. Sonny Styles is a run-to-the-board type of dude, and that is a guy who I think could be really awesome with Dotson and Jordan Brooks as his mentors, if you will, in terms of the linebacking core, especially in a 4-3 set, or even 3-4 obviously is an outside linebacker. That works too. The point of it is, I think Sonny Styles could be legitimately special. His pro comp is a guy who just got paid by the Panthers, not Jalen Phillips, but Devin Lloyd, who I think has shown himself to be a very versatile, very productive linebacker who could go all over the place and pretty much be useful in every situation you throw him in the NFL. So if Sonny Styles is Devin Lloyd in disguise, I can live with that. I think we can all live with that 4-3 speed that he's rolling into the NFL with. I still don't see any shot of him falling to 11, but if he does, go get him. And you run to the board faster than his 40 time. The next pick is a guy that I have mocked to Miami before, and I'm so glad I was able to mock him to Miami now. Emmanuel Pregnon, who is a pretty good zone fit. And like I've said before, I'm tired of square pegs, round holes. I want guys who are naturally good at particular positions, and I can plug them in there, and we can go to work easily, seamlessly. I don't like this. And I think he naturally fits left guard. You move Jonah to right. We move forward with the depth that we signed otherwise. Former starters, like I mentioned, in Sayer, and another offensive lineman we signed from Tampa, who also started time last year. So we move forward with some more depth, and we keep things pushing. Pregnon, I think, is a mauler type as well, which is something I've often said in all of these mocks. Whenever I drafted guards, I want a mauler. I want somebody that can be the replacement for Big Bob Hunt, where Big Bob was an absolute unit up front and was just moving people. And that's something Kevin Dotson does generally well. And Dotson in LA for the Rams has been able to move people and allows the obligatory tutties to Kyron Williams, which I think we would get to Devon getting the tutties more often with Pregnon there and being a left guard for this Dolphins team next year. So give me the road grader up front to make it hot with the second round pick that Miami has. Now, I went back to Ohio State and stayed in the Big Ten. You can see a theme here with Davidson Igbinosun, who is another. I had him mocked here last week, and I'm going to keep rolling with this. I would love a boundary corner. I know Miami signed some corners for depth bodies. We'll see if they can actually make the team, but I feel like we're going to lose either Rasul Douglas or Jack Jones, and I want a boundary corner to replace and be a student, if you will, for Douglas or Jones. And in the case of Douglas, I think the size thing would work out here, and though his play style, I think, is more Tre'Davious Ward-like, based off his physicality and based off of a little bit too handsy with the penalties. And Rick Wallen, I said a similar thing as well. I've seen the comps for both guys because they have really good size and are a little handsy, a little bit too many illegal contacts, PIs. I know Igbinosun dialed down on them a little bit this past season, but that can be a little wearisome for me and for many Dolphins. I do like that he is good in press coverage. I know they're a little bit more zone-based defensively with Hafley, but I would like some corners that can at least do some man coverage at a really high clip. So I went with Igbinosun here, once again, at the very same spot at 75. The receiver room, right? I've mentioned we got smaller receivers. And though Bryce Lance isn't necessarily physical, I think he fits the taller receivers that we do sorely need on this team. The more red zone threat kind of receivers that we do sorely need on this team, and more so keeping up with the speed theme that Miami still generally has in the receiver room. Bryce Lance being 6'2", that works. Bryce Lance also running a 4.3 in the combine, that also works. Bryce Lance, and I didn't even have to look up a comp for this. I kind of just figured that, oh yeah, that's who this guy fits. Christian Watson. This is a slam dunk one for me. They're thinking like, oh yeah, he's instantly Christian Watson. And that's the type of cat that, oh yeah, I think he can stretch the field and be a red zone threat and be, I hope, a little bit more consistent than Watson has been in Green Bay, with not only productions but health and a little bit of the dropsies that Watson had. It doesn't seem like Lance, from what I've read, has the dropsies as much as Watson, so I would vibe with that. And of course, you put him on the other side and as an X receiver or Z receiver with Waddle, and then you could have Washington, Atwell, or Tolbert in the slot, and now your receiver room's pretty cool. Sure, he's not as physical as I would like, but none of the Dolphins receivers are. And I would like, maybe in round 2, a Denzel Boston would probably fit this build, where we have a little bit more physicality as a receiver, but I do have a tight end idea that would help matters in terms of physicality. I'll get there in a little bit. DDS was the obvious pick at 90. I've mentioned many times before, I want DDS. I would take him at 90 and run. I don't think there's any chance he gets to 111 because of his size and his power ability. Could he get a little bit better in terms of speed rushing? Sure. But a lot of his skill and ability was based on him just being able to overwhelm and overpower a lot of the tackles that he played against at Penn State. And especially as the prime pass rusher, he was able to do that quite a bit at PSU for especially his junior and his senior years. The high motor is obviously there, and that's something that I think we really could. Obviously, you can never have too many high motor guys, and let's have another one. And I think a guy that he still fits and fits the most. I know compared him to Marcus Davenport, I've seen comps to him, but Preston Smith, I think, just fits way too well. It was just way too strong for a lot of tackles and just overwhelmed them with the bull rushes and the power game that he brings, and then got to the quarterback with relative ease and efficiency at his peak of powers. I think he really can be Preston Smith, legitimately. Plus, DDS's ability to line up inside when needed, because he did line up as tackle from time to time, and he obviously can block kicks. I've seen that a few times, especially last year. He was an absolute menace in that part, and even drop back into coverage low-key. I don't see that as much in the NFL, but he was able to actually do that at times at Penn State and be kind of a sneaky coverage guy and get innos at that time. See the Orange Bowl. He got a spectacular one in that game. So DDS at pick 90. I stayed at Penn State because, of course, and got Zachy Wheatley at 111. And the safety room still bothers me. I like Dante Trader. I think he can be good. I do want a little bit more size at safety. And a center fielder, in the sense of Wheatley, I think simply works out here. Where Wheatley as a ball hawk, and we need more of those on this team, I genuinely think he can play great center field and be really good in terms of pass coverage. Now, he could be a little bit better in terms of stopping the run and tackling and all that, but I like the skill that he may have in terms of the pass coverage here. Lewis Sin, I think, is a pretty good comp for him. I'm not ready to go Kyle Hamilton yet because I think Hamilton's way more balanced, but Wheatley in a sense of just staying in a zone and making plays on the ball, that's a guy I really like. And that's a guy I think really did a very good job of it at PSU, making plays and causing some turnovers. So Zachy Wheatley was the pick at 111 without much hesitation for me, because a lot of the safeties were gone by then, a lot of the ones I like. So Wheatley being the pick 111 was a pretty easy option. Now, tight end. Now, Miami just signed Ben Sims to a futures contract. I saw that earlier today. And I still think we're going to need one more tight end legitimately on the opposite side of Greg Dulcich, or as a alternative to Greg Dulcich, if you will. And I chose Tanner Colzio, who is a tight end from Houston. And because of his 6'7" frame, another red zone type of guy, you can line him up on the outside if needed, especially in the red zone. And I think that would be a really good look there, a receiving style tight end. The injuries are a little questionable, but when healthy, he's shown himself to be a pretty productive player in Houston. Now, some people have comped him to Darnell Washington. I think Washington's a better blocker, and I don't think Cosio is there yet. I think if he can get there, that would be awesome. But in the meantime, Kobe Parkinson's a pretty good comp for him, I would say. Where Parkinson's not the greatest blocker, but is pretty good in terms of a reliable seam threat. And I think Cosio can be as such in the NFL, at least until he develops the blocking. And upon doing so, I think it'll make this offense, or any offense he's in, a little bit more dynamic. You already know what's coming up here next. Now that I was able to get him at 227, it is the Drew Aller spot, if you will, where I would take Aller still, and I don't go after another veteran QB. You got that, and Willis is going to be your starter, and you have Aller and Ewers fight for QB too. And I think that's pretty simple for me. You've already heard this from me enough with Aller, with his arm and his abilities. The Kerry Collins comp still sticks. Or the Roethlisberger, I think it's an absolute ceiling. So I would still take Aller here at 227, despite Miami signing Willis this offseason. And lastly, Caden Curry, another high-end edge rusher in the Big Ten, this time in Ohio State. And with Curry, I think what makes him stand out as well is the fact that he too has a high-end motor, and you love to see that, but he also has a pretty solid ability to stop the run. And as I mentioned before, the Dolphins in stopping the run sometimes just did not mix. And he can also use his versatility to play 3-4 or 4-3. That also works out. Is he the flashiest or the fastest type of dude? No. Is his high-end stuff there overall? Maybe not. But the motor is obviously good. The versatility is obviously good. And you can't have enough run stuffers in the NFL. And his player comp turned into another pretty solid player in Travis Gibson for the Panthers. And I think he's not overly flashy, probably not an overall starter type, but a good role player. And again, you can't have too many role players, or in Miami's case, edge rushers. We had that problem for a while where our edge rushers continuously got hurt. So we can't have too many of those, even though Miami signed two in the Big Ten this past week, even to go with another Big Ten edge rusher in Chad Robinson. And obviously what I just did today with this mock, having two more Big Ten pass rushers. So there you have it. I went very Big Ten heavy once again with 7 of the 9 guys in this draft are Big Ten dudes. And it's been a theme. Why not go to the best conference in college football for the premium talent to translate more than likely into the NFL? So that's what I did here. And what I'm going to do next here are talk about the power rankings, NHL and NBA. Power rankings coming up later this week. Ideally, once again, NHL Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, NBA Thursday, Friday. I may have to do the NBA one a little sooner than normal because of the brackets and March Madness. I will have to figure that into the NBA version of Power Rankings. You probably already know where I'm going to go with the NHL version of this. However, Vancouver, you're the first stop of my next train of thought.